Okay, so I like the fact that at the end of the day, these are intelligent, thoughtful, and fundamentally decent people who are weighing in on the subject, during the course of which they emphasize certain values that I do ascribe to: free speech, critical thinking and rationality, and open dialogue, and issues like non-aggression, and as StormClouds put it, a principle of coexisting strategies. Well, this specific issue is something that's already a reality, and it's better to align with it than not to, and constructively critique those practices and ideas that we disagree with. We already have this kind of principle when you look at the sheer diversity of cultural expression on this planet, and how we can tolerate the Amish, for instance, side by side modern market economy-based lifestyles. The principle of coexisting strategies essentially means a very similar thing to what Sam Harris is talking about with the moral landscape. There are many peaks to potentials of flourishing. So if that means there are Pennsylvania Dutch living their lives and traditional hunter-gatherers living theirs, side by side the modern world, and even approaches that resemble something like a resource-based economy. Look, as long as these are not incredibly dysfunctional and damaging communities that are harming people, then what we absolutely need to do is align with the reality. We should accept this, not dictatorially force anything, and allow human society to emerge from a nurse crop of fairly fundamental principles and ideals already outlined: individual rights and freedoms within reason, non-aggression and coexisting strategies or tolerance, and so on. Then we truly will reap what we sow, and it will be a flourishing renaissance rather than a harvest of sorrow. And we see in human history that times of flourishing are marked by a huge degree of tolerance, not without the key ingredient of rationality, however. And we both advocate this, it seems. No one is saying that the Amish have to assimilate, and that this would be the case in a resource-based economy or market economy. Now, there are different conversations we can have. One is a very dramatic distant scenario of a future society: no laws, no money, no politicians, or no state, or whatever particular perspective you have. Now, all the concerns that come up with this, such as social maintenance and social productivity, well, these are two essential concerns, when you boil it down, about what a future society would be like, and the problem that people have with regards to not having money and not having traditional politics and laws. How are you going to have maintenance of a non-pathological society without laws? How are you going to have a productive society as an aggregation of the individual economic decision-making and behaviors without money? This is the core of the calculation problem, for instance. Well, how are you going to have these things? Well, to my mind, these are future issues. They're very relevant concerns, and I won't provide all-encompassing answers to them. What I'm actually arguing is the following. We want to have a rational, stepwise approach to the way we work with our current conditions, the current tools we have now, rather like if someone has cancer and we say, look, we have the surgery plans, we have the chemo plans, we have the organic fruit juice that's been recommended, we have the mutual support of friends and family, we're bringing dogs to the hospital and exposing you to naturalistic environments as part of our understanding of the biophilia hypothesis, and so on. So yes, in the future we'll have gene therapy and some kind of nanotech, perhaps, that maybe attacks cancer cells, or a pill that is a cure, or whatever it happens to be. But right now we actually have to help you, the cancer patient, with what we have now, what's available, and considering all the constraints that we have to deal with. So right now I'd like the operating mechanism to be rational discussion and an open marketplace of ideas being exchanged, the currency they carry being weighed in their inherent logic as well as pragmatic concerns. We can say that we're interested in the greater good of human flourishing, non-aggression, and the freedom of individuals and groups to follow their own approaches to social life. This is a between-group, mutually respectful kind of baseline value that should transcend borders, ideological, religious, or cultural. And where this is not possible is the degree to which the group or strategy in question should be heavily scrutinized and policed by the wider rational and cooperating community. For example, an oppressive, corrupt dictatorship that harms human beings within its own boundaries and threatens those outside of it as well may forfeit non-strategic intervention to exert systematic change. This is not that complicated. I'm not talking about invading a country because of veiling women. This could simply be openly criticized and exposed via the media and public discourse to alternate practices. However, Kim Jong-il and his catastrophic mismanagement of North Korea should be treated as not as an acceptable alternate path to human flourishing. As far as I'm concerned, in the big picture, no laws, no money, no politicians, as is often talked about in the Venus Project. Well, frankly, I don't care about talking like this anymore. I don't care about talking about doing away with money, laws or politicians, because if you stick to that like a mantra, it becomes something dogmatic that people are saying for its own sake, even if it has a root logic to it that is not dogmatic or ideological. It's actually rational, but no more should people just talk like this. What you should talk about is the end goal. It's not actually to end money. The end goal is to provide access, quality of life, higher living standards, and incredibly cutting-edge engineered infrastructure. Now, if that means that in the process money becomes less relevant, then so be it. Now, this kind of conversation happens all the time when people talk about the Venus Project and a resource-based economy, but it needs to be underscored. Ousting money from the social fabric is not what it's about. What it's about is providing issues like access abundance, strategic access, and improving the quality of life and so on and so forth. It's about the parsimonious solving of problems in human social life, from water and electricity to crime. And that doesn't matter if it involves money. If it involves money, it involves money. If this is only in the interim, then so be it. What we actually want to do is acknowledge that we have some very fundamental ideas in mind that are mutually compatible. We want to have a quality of life, we want to have mobility, we want to have individual freedoms whilst at the same time having people as a unit, as a society, flourishing, and to have productivity and safety. And I don't want anybody to sit there and be so dogmatic in their own mantras of individualism that they don't even like me saying things like units or groups of society. These are fluid concepts and an emergent property of social life, and this is actually true in the scientific level and biological level. Right? There are groups in biology and individuals who necessarily exist within their context. And if you want to call them corporate units, there are corporate units all the way up and all the way down in biology. Whether we're talking about multicellular organisms or groups of organisms or cooperating units of genes and chromosomes, all the way up and down the hierarchy of levels in biology, we have individual units existing in the context of groups and groups in the context of other groups. And very often, the flourishing of the individual depends upon the survival and flourishing of their group. To say nothing of the nature of human sociality, that we are a group-living, culturally dependent organism whose brain will not even develop normally without issues like socialization, transmission of language, and so on. Our physical well-being, economic activity, security, and so on are integrally part of wider social life, and hence derived in large part from the quality of our society. It doesn't mean you're dictated to remain within it or forced to be subordinated. This is a quality of life we have to take into account. When we're thinking about individual flourishing, we also need to talk about the productivity of people in the whole group. Society we need to talk about, and we need to talk about communities and groups at the same time as we talk about the individual. There's not incompatibility here. These things are not incompatible. In fact, these things flourish together. But when StormClouds or Stef talk about their ideas, and that we have ours. Look, at the end of the day, we have very fundamental similar ideas. We want people to have a good quality of life, access, mobility. We don't want people to die of diseases, the water supply to be full of shit. We don't want the air to be polluted. We don't want resources to be wasted. And we don't want dysfunctional schemes dominating the political sphere. We want to have a rational approach to the way we orient our lives and economic activity. And when Stef makes an argument like the calculation problem, he's making an argument for, well, look, there's no way to get around this. He's making a rational argument. My temporary response would be, it appears to be a problem in the interim between now and further down the line, resource-based economy. So it's difficult to know the wants and desires of people and the information required for orienting production. But this doesn't exist in any vacuum in an absolute sense. These values and practices of individuals, their preferences, and how they culminate a wider economy do evolve and do change. Right now, the fact that someone might desire a diamond watch is not something that's going to be, as far as I'm concerned, valued in the future. However, it is now and for the foreseeable future. And what we need to do is we need to maximize human flourishing and afford a quality and dignity of life. And people shouldn't be subordinated, locked out, or dictated to. But that doesn't mean we get rid of money straight away, or perhaps for quite a while. What we need to establish are certain similarities: the non-aggression principle, the principle of coexisting strategies. We can also agree to certain fundamental notions of what humans need for quality of life on a scientific level. Okay, and what accounts for that and what it means. Now, the Venus Project, as it talks about, and people who talk about this in the Zeitgeist movement, actually talk about this on a scientific level, which transcends ideologies, so this is not an ideological issue. Now, we will diverge on how these things are achieved. However, If we can come to some kind of agreement on these things, and I think we can incredibly easily, we will see an enthusiastic overlap between anarcho-capitalists, socialists, resource-based economy advocates, and then you've got some people having a rational discussion, exchanging ideas, rather than yelling at each other with dogma and ideology. Now, I feel that the logical underpinnings and proposal of a resource-based economy is superior to our current methods and approaches of orienting economic activity, and they're truly going at every idea with a principle of scientific rationalism geared towards humane ends leads further away from monetary or market economics towards scientifically based engineering. I will further argue that this process has occurred thanks in part to the macro-scale developments of large-scale market economies and the way in which humans have culturally evolved. I don't make the mistake of thinking libertarians or anarcho-capitalists lack principles, and this really shouldn't be done with people who support a resource-based economy. I also want to say thanks to StornCloudsGathering and Stef at FreedomainRadio for weighing in on these issues, giving their critique, and at least for myself, encouraging critical thinking and dialogue. I really like these kinds of people, and they have a lot to offer.
Okay, let's face the party.